enough. That's good enough.
Hey, man, we're on
Hey.
Apple iTunes.
I know, big news.
You can find us now on your device that you get your podcasts on. You can.
All you, Sammy boy, all you. I was mowing today while Sammy was making us worldwide.
I think it's a team effort because I went back to those emails you sent me from that guy that gave us what was it, 1 through 15 steps of doing it. I'm like, it's got to be in here somewhere. So
yeah, no, Buzzsprout. So, listeners, we're on Buzzsprout and Apple Podcasts, right?
Right.
Plus, obviously, our YouTube channel.
So you can search us on whatever app you get your podcast for, and we should come up in that directory. So
yeah,
we only got 2.
Right.
So we're too damn cheap.
Over 30 days, we only get 2 or 3, right?
Hours. It's 3 hours.
Okay, so that would be, we'll get a total once we're really rocking and rolling. Listeners be able to choose, be able to pick from one of the last 3 broadcasts, right?
Right.
That's good. That's good.
The
first ones, I mean, I love the people, but I think we've had. I don't
think Tara would be offended. I don't think Tara would be offended by saying that. No. We love you, Tara. You helped us tremendously.
We do.
We consider you a partner here.
So listen, I want to have as much time with your guest as possible. This is Sammy's guest, a friend of his. And I mean, if you read his book, Mexican Sunset, or his bio, of course, I got to tell you, this is, and by the way, we're brought to you by HappyFridayNeighbors.com, Happy Friday Neighbors newsletter that comes out every Friday. Been doing it for 25 years. Little anecdotes, quotes, things about business, pictures, a lot of pictures, so that you don't get hung up in all that word stuff. And then the Right Choice Farm and Catering here in Northern California. We're all California cuisine and farm to fork, and we have an event space and all of that. Sam.
We're brought to you on this side of the country here in Bloomington, Illinois by Pride Staff, a full service staffing company, temp to hire, direct hire, recruiting, the whole works. Also, I'm going to switch it up a little bit on you this week, Mark. We're also brought to you by Sammy Substack, the Finally Friday Philosophy.
Whoa.
So
nice.
Be looking for that in your email box.
Wait, what's it called again?
I call it the PPP.
Yeah, but what does that stand
Finally for? Friday Philosophy.
Finally
Friday.
Finally philosophy.
The
Philosophy Friday.
And I started it many years ago when I was still at Quantex. I started sending out a little email blips.
I got them.
Start asking for more, and well, you're a contributor whether you know it or not. Mark on the mark. And I forgot how many of those I did, and that was a ton of them. I still got a lot of them,
but finally
Friday.
Friday.
It's finally Friday.
Finally Friday philosophy. But you're spelling it with a P. Each of those.
It's because philosophy is spelled with a P.
Teaching impressionable young kids how to misspell words.
Yes.
Okay, well, there we go.
Nothing gets past you.
I know. So finally, it's spelled with
so
P.
Anyway, Mark's a contributor. We'll have the link to our podcast in it. It kind of made me sad, Mark, because I was looking back to my file. When Google killed Blogger, it killed the Finally Friday Philosophy, the PPP, because it wasn't easy to make a newsletter like that back then.
Right.
So I just didn't resume it, and then I discovered Substack, and I was like, man, this is great. There's so many good things about Substack. Maybe they should be a sponsor of this podcast. But as I was looking back some of my files, my email files of all these people who contributed to it, 3 of my big contributors have passed away since then. And it kind of made me sad, because what's that?
Putting me on the spot.
No, they've, health issues, and one of them was pretty dramatic, but I was looking at it, I was like, man, these are people who are in my life sending me these emails to put in, they didn't really want recognition. They just found something funny. They said, Sam would love this in the PPP.
Yeah.
So it was,
Yeah.
it was
That is
interesting.
hard though. That when you run into those things, someone sent me an early, and I've had the same thing happen. Someone sent me an early posting of Happy Friday Neighbors back, 20 years
You've
ago.
been doing a long
Dude,
time.
talk about
Manhattan Beach thing.
rough. Like it was, basically just me writing with a headline, no pics, nothing. I mean, it was pretty rough around the
Can you
edges.
believe you've been doing it that long? That was the thing that surprised me. I think we're new to this, and we're what we're doing here, and I'm like, I don't know. You've been doing it 20-something years.
I even when traveling, I would make sure I had Europe, all over the place, and I would make sure that I had a Happy Friday Neighbors to go out. Yeah.
So, we got a couple minutes, but I felt, I didn't want to say anything, but I felt like this guest might strike a chord with you.
Yeah,
today.
he's a lot of the same sensibilities. Absolutely. And he's with CBRE, which I don't know. I know a couple of executives with CBRE, commercial
Well, you're
real
gonna have
estate.
to educate me on that. I know what he does, sort of, but
Is he commercial real estate?
yeah,
Still?
kind of for
I think he-
mobile home parks. He has a
Oh,
specialty,
I
mobile
think
home parks.
I thought he said in there. Well, we'll ask him. I thought he said he's with CBRE, and
Yeah, I think so.
yeah. So I know a couple of guys. So, all right.
He's had, I'm not sure where I met him. I maybe that's a question I'll ask him if he can remember where we met. But just seems like we're always in the coffee shop together.
Well,
because he was writing he literally writes in a coffee shop sometimes, and that might be it. I don't know. So I want to make sure we leave enough room at the end so we. And don't let me forget to take a picture. That picture turned out marvelous. That's better than our other thumbs, didn't you think?
That's great. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
All right.
It should be a regular thing. All right. I'll see you on the other side.
All right.
So, hey, Rick.
There he is.
Hey,
Hey,
gentlemen.
Rick. How are you?
Good. I'm good.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, first of all, I got to do the introduction. Rick, this is my friend Mark Lips.
I know you sold one. You sold one.
You gave one away.
I
don't know, Mark. I don't know if you've had but mine
is signed probably. Yeah. All right.
Hey, this is my friend Mark. We're high school buddies from way back. We've somehow managed to stay connected. He lives in Lake County, California. His family, him and his wife own a farm-to-table farm and an Airbnb and an event space, the Ripe Choice. It's a lovely place. Was out there in February, right nestled in the wine country there. So in February, Mark and I were talking that, we talk so much. People have told us we need to get our own podcast. So we just said, let's do it together. Rick Jebb, Mark, I don't know how I met him. Maybe he remembers, but I seem like it's always, every time we've been together, we've been in a coffee shop. And more than once, whether I had a meeting with him or not, I've seen him in a coffee shop, on his laptop writing something. So I read some early parts of the book. This was probably before COVID, I'm sure, Rick, right?
Yes.
So I want to, my friend here, Rick, has got his book out, Mexican Sunset. I'm going to read you his intro because I liked it a lot. All right. So if you don't mind this, Rick is a neurodivergent author who writes about adaptation, multigenerational influence, the power of community, art, and nature. He's been called an artist trapped in a businessman's body, has striven to transverse the realms of ecology, geography, history, literature, fine art, neuroscience, religion, and business. He's often focused on the questions of how to go on when you want to quit. He deals with death, depression, mental illness, and love. I'm going to skip the next part, the authors, for a second. He's an avid world traveler. I knew this from following him on Facebook, a wilderness camper. And since the age of 12, he's led numerous canoe and hiking trips ranging from 3 to 20 days. As a canoeist and a whitewater paddler from age 11 through 30, Rick paddled over 2,000 miles on lakes and rivers, mostly throughout Ontario, Canada. He's run numerous whitewater rivers and hiked mountains, trails throughout the eastern United States. Rick has been writing seriously since 2010. He has 7 essays published with the Boundary Waters Journal, Fathom, and Ecstasis magazine since 2019. Listeners, welcome our guest, Mr. Rick Jebb. Good to see you, brother.
Hey, likewise.
I'm excited to
I'm
talk about
honored.
this book.
Thank you.
My first question, I mean, the entire time I'm reading, I'm going, how does he remember all these details? I mean, do you keep a journal? Did you keep a journal? I don't remember ever talking to you about that necessarily.
I apologize. Well, that's a really good question. It's one of the kind of freakish things about my brain. The downside is that I don't forget a lot of stuff. I dwell on things. Fortunately, I probably had a preponderance of enjoyable memories and evocative moments in my life that I turn to the memories of as a form of, I'd like to say a healthy form of escapism, but we all know that, any form of escapism, has its reasonable limits. But I dwell in the past as much as I anticipate and live for the future, all in the present. So I'm harvesting emotional triggers from my past that have been very important in my development as a human.
Did
And my
you?
survival.
I think that's what, when you're, to put it simply, for instance, people who are very passionate about golf, for instance, golf, right? Going out, hitting this ball. Mark Twain said it was a good walk spoiled, but it was, people can remember every shot, Sam, I could ask you about an IndyCar race in 1977, and you would give me details about it. So I think when you have these passionate moments, or all this passion about a particular area, and you have all these, like you said, really great moments and epiphanies throughout there, that stuff stays with you. Kind of says something about the lack of epiphanies for me, I guess. I don't remember anything.
Well, you're not short of a lack of epiphanies. I feel certain, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I mean, part of what I liked about your book, several things I liked about your book, but part of it was a little bit of, what was the guy that wrote The Source and Chesapeake and
Michener?
Yeah, it's sort of Michener in a sense that there's things that it seemed like you'd done some research on it. You remember that place, but then like the meatpacking industry and some, when you visited the capital, the place in Mexico with the pyramid, the giant pyramid, and then you had the expansion bridge, the largest. I mean, that's not something you remember. That's something you got to know, right?
Well, so that's a great point. I mean, I have memories and they're vivid, and, I am a delusional thinker. I mean, I think everybody's delusional to a point, but I believe I'm a little bit further out there on the curve. And so I'm convinced that I have crystal clear memories and knowledge of things until I discover otherwise. And if you're writing a book, you better do your homework to make sure what you're remembering is what actually exists. So, yeah, and actually that was one of the more enjoyable parts of the process was just, learning deeper, gaining deeper understanding of things that surrounded me at times in my life that were powerful influences. But, now I was like turning the focus in, turning the dial and trying to zoom in and really, really understand, what that was then, which of course brought it all back into full view and then started to open up, recollections of certain events and people and conversations, which of course I don't suggest that my narrative or my dialogue is from a transcript, from when I was 19 and high as a kite. It is a.
I mean, it's fair to say there's a lot of experimenting with drugs and alcohol in this book.
Well, I think I felt like I was kind of a lightweight and a wannabe.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
I'm sorry. I think that's true, but I always felt like I was kind of a lightweight and a wannabe and just a cautious explorer of, what was going on in the counterculture at the time.
I think though, that was also kind of the time period. I mean,
well, that's true. I mean, I think all three of us are the same age, right? I mean, I know Mark and I are. So that was interesting seeing dates and times in your book and thinking what I was doing then,
Well, Rick was born in 56.
Yeah.
All of you?
Yeah.
56 all the way around?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's cool.
So I kind of, here, listeners, we ought to tell, what I found fascinating with Rick was he had depth from early on. Me, I was thinking about girls. I was thinking about, you had, going off, finding your buddy, going and deciding to take that canoe trip. The other thing is, I think, at least I didn't, I can only speak for me, I guess, is, boy, you just had some incredible role models and mentors and peers that were just fantastic and a guiding force or at least a bar that you had to maintain, and gave you good advice and all of that. I mean, I think of all that, and not to mention, you had a pretty interesting, privileged sort of upbringing as well, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I consider myself very fortunate. It's weird. I listened to a lot of people that said a lot of really, really good things. I didn't always act on those things, but I retained a lot of them because they were special moments. They were people that were kind to me when I, needed somebody to pay attention or to redirect me or try to redirect me. And so I held on to those things. And then life's funny the way, if you can remember a couple of really powerful messages that somebody gave you, you get a chance to test those out without having, just blindly followed along. And so it turns out a lot of the advice, most of the advice that I retained, it seemed like it proved to be true, and I learned that the hard way most of the time.
I think that's often true with the message to deliver, but the learning occurs later,
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but to take a pivotal moment in your life and to be 11 or 12 years old, grab a buddy, travel by train to Unc's place, and then put in somewhere and hit the water for 3 days, and you were canoeing, and then you get picked up, which is nice. That's, you don't see too many 12-year-olds doing that. I love that. I love that. I sent my middle son one time, I said he wanted to go to a hockey game. I had a couple of tickets. I said, you know what, you guys, you can't drive. He was probably 12 or 13. And I said, go jump on a train and get to downtown LA and go to the hockey game, get back on the train, come back here to the beach, because the train would take you all the way there and all the way back. And that was a real experience for them. They'd never done that. They always got driven everywhere. So, and all my kids, by the way, Rick, you'll appreciate this. All my kids had to climb Mount Whitney.
Nice.
My youngest son, my middle son climbed when he was 10 years old.
Wow.
People at the top were making me feel bad because it was pretty inclement weather. That's the tallest mountain in the U.S. and in the contiguous U.S. And we were getting really bad weather up there. And they said, "Son, aren't you kind of young to be up here? And where's your dad?" And I'm like slinking off behind a boulder. So, but I just love that. That's depth. That's, real stuff.
It honestly, some of those early adventures when it was a little bit more managed and supervised, at summer camp, really saved me when I was a kid, because I was trying to fit into a new community. My first father sort of disappeared and nobody had an explanation. And I wasn't.
That was a question I want to ask. Well, can we come back to that? Go ahead. But I was very interested in that.
Well, go ahead. I mean, hit me with a question.
Because you mentioned it. I don't know if did you ever discover where he disappeared to for that period of time, or?
Yeah. Well,
you're connected with him, right?
So this book takes place over a 5-year span. And it's 14 to 19, and after this book finishes, I don't want to spoil. I don't think this is a spoiler alert, but you can imagine with all my activities when I was in college in Mexico, I wasn't a great student.
I'm shocked at that.
So,
by the way, listeners, he dies in the end. So
yeah, spoiler alert, he's dead.
But basically, I flunk out of school and I return home to Hinsdale, and I have a new stepfather now, replacing the one that died, and I have a relationship with my father. He actually, in the book, took me on a trip to explore it was my one college trip with my dad, who's in recovery, and I take him to Mexico City, and then we drive into the mountains to go to Cholula and check this place out. And of course, he says, "Where should we stay?" And I set us up at the Camino Real, and I start partying, at the age of 18. By the time I get there with my fake military IDs or whatever, no, if anybody's asking, and I think I hit every bar in the hotel, every discotheque. I got into the room at maybe 3:30 in the morning, or maybe it was a little earlier. I don't know. And when the sun rose and my father said, "All right, let's go, college trip," I said, "I don't want to go to school here. I don't want to get up." And he's like, "You got to be kidding." He was very nice about it and somehow got me to go forward. But
it was a lot of coffee.
So circling back, a lot of coffee and a lot of subtle shaming, and my empathy started to bubble up, and I finally did the right thing, and we had a great day eventually. But after I come back from Mexico, I go to Hinsdale, and my mother and stepfather asked the question, "So what are your plans for the summer?" And I said, "Oh, that's easy. I'm just going to party with my friends for the next 3 months." And they said, "Well, maybe, but you're going to have to pay rent, and you're going to need a job." And I said, "Well, what if I can't get a job, and then I can't pay rent?" And they said, "Well, then you're going to have to leave." And I said, "Well, where am I going to go?" And they said, "Well, I think that's for you to figure out, not us." And fortunately, I had a place to go, and so I moved to Tucson and worked construction with some friends that I had met, in the course of sort of hitchhiking, the hitchhike that section in the book. And they took me in and we hung out, and I learned I didn't want to be a construction worker. It just didn't seem like the long-term strategy for me. I think I was making $3 an hour as a partner in this, fledgling company. And anyway, so I take off, and I have a job offer to be a canoeing guide for Canadian waters in Ely, Minnesota. And that's a whole other story. But I go and try my hand at that. And it turns out I'm hippie drifter party boy that has no common sense, and probably anybody that associates with me at that time in my life is putting their life in danger.
Mark,
Even
how
though-
did we not run into this guy? Because it
Sounds
sounds like
familiar.
sounds like guys.
because I jumped off from Ely one time up to the Boundary Waters and
Well, I'm
hit those
thinking of this
waters
partying
tonight.
thing. I'm thinking it sounded like a guy we ran into at one point in our career. But
You
anyway,
might
go
we
ahead.
might have run into each other. One of my mistakes was, they kind of gave me reduced hours because I was a threat to their business and their liability insurance, and so
That's
I
how you do
spent
it.
my off time in bars during the day, and I ended up picking up this pretty cute, slightly older woman who turned out to be the owner of Canadian Waters' girlfriend. So I was already like, half
In
buried,
trouble.
and
Yeah.
that was not a good move.
Not
No.
a good move.
But after that, I went and reconnected with my dad and learned all the answers to the mysteries of his disappearing acts.
And
Well, that's another book.
all right, we'll wait.
Uh,
For,
okay,
we'll wait for that one because I
so
want to
what-
know. I thought it was interesting, how you when you dodged the bullet with the hitchhiking and the guy with the U-Haul and with the people in the U-Haul.
I
John
questioned-
Candy in that whole Bavarian group, wasn't that John Candy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Like, in the back of the
Yeah, that
I
sounded a little
don't.
different.
All I
than
know
that.
was I was freaked out beyond belief. I really still question to this day, was I just, having a flashback or something, or, was this guy, I mean,
Oh, there's
we're-
too many
we're-
details there. That was
but the pointed teeth were kind of a deal killer for me. And, if he had offered a ride in the front seat, I probably would have taken it, maybe. But when it was, we're going to put you in the back, and I hear all these, mumbling and, shuffling around back there, I'm like,
what do you got against pointed teeth?
well, I don't know. It just depends on, what a person's diet is,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're,
another one of my favorite lines in there is Gabriella, right?
yeah,
And so you go down and you're bearing gifts of meat. I was like, who brings smoked meat?
it's all I had.
From Chicago to
It's
Mexico,
not a meatpacking family.
bearing gifts of smoked meat.
What was the only thing I could, I didn't have I mean, I actually had some savings because I worked in the factory and got union meatpacking wages as a teenager, which wasn't bad. But the cool thing was that I had contacts there from working there, and Wanda, who worked the sales desk, was a friend of mine, and I knew my mother had an account there, and it's like the kid at the country club that runs up the bill. I'm like, well, I'll have 3 smoked butts and a Canadian bacon and a Christmas ham.
honey spiraled ham, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, who picks up honey spiraled ham to take to their girlfriends?
Well, it's all I had actually
I
for
know.
Easter. It was spring break. It was Easter. They celebrated Easter.
Wow.
It was.
That makes sense, I guess.
I
Yeah.
thought that might elevate my status, but
So she
I was
seems to
wrong.
have really driven a stake in your heart.
Well, all right,
And,
let's talk about our first.
Let me rephrase that. Maybe because
A
it was
stake?
nicer than that, but it was like, I mean, she stayed with you this experience. Maybe it was a pretty steak. Maybe it was a T-bone. Now that I think of it, that kind of steak.
Yeah, or a ham steak, but
Ham steak.
but first loves, I mean, like, they're powerful. It's like the world shifts when you have that experience. And I was 16, and I thought I was going to marry this girl, and she was 2 years older than me, and she had been sent off to a boarding school in Colorado by her parents that were trying to break up her relationship with a much older Mexican playboy. And so she had already been kind of turned. And then I think, I don't know if but
Turn.
she turned me,
Yeah, that was
from
obvious.
innocence into, like knowing about the world.
Well, to me, it was like that part of the book is like you were the corrupter. I mean, he thought you were the corrupter, and really it was the other way around. She was the corrupter in a sense.
Well, all I could tell you is when and these were very connected people in their community. And we got pulled over in a traffic incident that we were at fault in. And the local police put handcuffs on me and her. And I think we had one of her girlfriends was with us, and we're going to be hauled off to prison. And she says something in Spanish about, do you know who my father is? And they take the handcuffs off of us and they go put them on the other people, and they say, you're free to go. I mean, it's just how, it's how it works.
I mean, to me, I would think if the old man had showed up, knowing, what you talked about in the book and how they're connected, the old man shows up at the apartment or the hotel room or whatever. I think if I've been you, I'd have got the hell out of town.
Well,
the
I
brothers
thought that I was
show up
probably
next.
going to probably be killed.
Yeah,
but
the
maybe
brothers
it
show
was
up next.
The meatpacking dynasty, maybe he felt like, maybe there was another gang, in Chicago that,
well,
might
there you
come.
got that, I guess. You
I mean,
have
I
that
don't.
one.
It
So
was tough.
So I was curious about your book author choices. You got like Herman Hesse. I had to look a couple of these guys up, and I'm well read, but Anthony Doerr, Barry Lopez, just to name a few. But I mean, obviously Ray Bradbury, H.G. Wells, Frank Herbert, all very familiar with. Walt Whitman. But I guess I didn't know your love of the science fiction, and you and I have talked a gazillion books over the years. So that was a little surprising to me.
I have a very, very broad range in art and including music and literature. And I mean, I think I just kind of like everything almost, not equally, but and I know people that just have a very narrow focus, and it's no less passionate, and it's more, I don't know. But
maybe that's why we talk books so well together, I guess. But Herman Hesse, though, I'm not sure I'm a Herman Hesse guy, but
I mean, if you haven't read Steppenwolf 3 times or 5 times,
I don't know if I'm trying to think if I've read it. Obviously, if I did, it didn't make an impression on me.
It was still to this day maybe one of the most powerful things that I've read.
All right, maybe I'll have to revisit that.
And I'm still writing about it, and it was he was brilliant. I mean, the two most influential books were Steppenwolf and then 100 Years of Solitude.
Well, I will give you that one. That's one of my favorites.
And both of those authors won the Nobel Prize for Literature, because of their body of work. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me is that if you get to that level in writing, people either love you or hate you or don't know who you are. And I mean, there's nothing in the middle. And it just surprised me. You'd think if your work is that recognized at that level, that everybody would just think you're wonderful. But it's just not true. It's controversial stuff. It rips at the soul, and it doesn't pull everybody in the same direction.
Rick Rubin, I know the music producer, wrote a book came out this year, but he says that in his book. He says, when you're getting to it, you're going to alienate some people if you're doing it right.
Right.
So
that's so true.
So Emily Dickinson's on there, and I've been shocked if she wasn't, but particularly after reading your book, I'm like, yeah, that's right up his alley. Emily Dickinson, she's in a room by herself, clawing the paint off the walls and thinking about death.
She was tripping a lot. I mean,
doing something
on something.
Yeah, I hard to believe she was straight all the time, but
Rick,
I don't know.
So right now you're in commercial real estate, correct?
My wife thinks I'm retired. I did step down from a big company position at CBRE. mean, a big company in a, small position, but, ran a national team of specialized brokers in the trailer park category of all things.
Okay.
But I just can't quit. The year after I resigned, I had my best year ever.
Here, right. You know how many times people have said that after I resigned, I had my best year ever. And it's usually because you're choosing which ones you want to work on. And there's no baggage. You're not getting in the way of yourself. Now, you were CBRE. So did you know Whitley Collins or Clay Hammerstein, any of those guys by any
Those
chance?
names both sound familiar to me. I'm assuming they were super high producers there.
I knew both those guys, on the West Coast, and I know Clay ran CBRE on the West Coast. I didn't know if it was a national thing or just his region. Whitley, he took over for Whitley, who started his own commercial real estate and then went back to CBRE. But both those guys pretty well known and respected in that company. So
that was the most, I'm not a corporate guy. I never thought I would be. I started my real estate career in a big corporate gig. I hated it for all the reasons that, a slow and contemplative, not mechanic oriented person, in terms of spreadsheets. Actually, I morphed in those roles, but CBRE, I almost went to work there 3 times. I got to know Gary Beban early on, when he was sort of transforming the company. I remember a funny story. I was working for Marcus and Millichap, another California company. They were starting out in Chicago, so I got all the firepower of all the top brass, trying to make sure that they, got a beachhead established so they could expand nationally. And gosh, the whole so I don't know how I got in touch with Beban, but I was sort of a little disenchanted, looking for a bigger thing. Somebody knew him, or one of the guys from Balcor American Express went there and said, you should call this guy. And so I remember going to these offices in Lincolnshire, and it's a 7:00 meeting in the morning, and I'm still young and stupid and full of myself, and still am today, but maybe a little less so. But I show up, and the guy answers the door, and it took him like 5 minutes. I'm ringing the bell, or the offices are closed, and this guy shows up, and he's sort of moping around, and is in his jeans, and I'm a little offended. It's like, I've got a meeting with Gary Beban. I don't want to be late. When do you open the doors here? And then he reaches out his hand and says, hey, Rick, nice to meet you. I'm Gary.
Yeah.
One of those, but anyway, I love the company.
My question is, after all the backpacking and traveling and canoeing and adventures and all of this stuff, was it because of a family that were overachievers in a sense? Owned a meatpacking company, your unc, and all that. I'm surprised you didn't go and open, become a wilderness guide, or go open your own camp somewhere that you would take people on adventures, maybe help them get to the top of Mount Everest or whatever.
Well, I almost did, that in all those forms and others, 100 times. Have a bad day at work, a deal blows up, you're working for the man, whatever you're telling yourself that isn't working, you think about how do you return to your first loves, your childhood loves, and it just never worked out. I almost bought country inns. I almost bought outfitting businesses, but I know I'm delusional, and I know I'm delusional because, wanting to own a bed and breakfast in a beautiful place or have a retreat, I think that's the business that you're in. I had my son visit with my grandson last weekend, and two guests, people I love dearly, and I could barely handle the like picking up after people, and like I got to make the bed now, and
Right,
what if
right.
something breaks in this place? I got to fix it. I can't call somebody.
I
I,
hired for that. That's well,
Mark spent the day mowing a field.
yeah.
So
I mean, we have our dreams, but sometimes we're not suited for them. I mean, it doesn't, and we only find out by doing it.
where
Right.
are you at right now, Rick? What?
I'm in my home office in my my basement. I don't come down here much.
It says Chicago, Illinois on the.
That's weird. I don't know why. Yeah, it does say that. I must have typed in something wrong. See, I just can't really do anything normally.
Well, that's what I like about you.
I'm not a precision
Okay.
guy.
All right.
I know brain surgery wasn't going to be my thing.
Sam's going to want me to get to this very quickly, but as a
'Cause
writer,
we got 5 minutes right now.
I know that's
All right.
that's why. As a writer, Rick, have you ever used AI?
I just started using it, not to write stuff, but to research, because it's like if you think Googling stuff is cool, right? And we all like have sort of become, dependent on that. AI is like having a team of genius experts that will go out and search everywhere and bring it all in like seconds in a cohesive, tight, presentation. And if you want to answer a question about or solve a debate about 3 or 4 controversial, complex issues, put the genius machine on it.
How do you know it's true? How do you know it's accurate?
Well, there's that. So if I'm dealing in theoretical areas, and it's just, it's not a binary thing. It's opinion. And I think that's where their strength is. If it's something that, is about fake news, I don't know if they're, going to fake me out.
What platform do you use for AI?
I was using ChatGPT.
Yeah. So
just because that sort of was one of the first to pop up, but
it's still
I've used a couple of the other ones. It's remarkable.
They are.
I even on my newsletter, Sam, on my newsletter, and I use Constant Contact as my format and to store my emails and all that stuff to send out my newsletter. But they have let me know that they now have AI if I want to take advantage of it. That's wild.
I've got it on. I use Evernote. I use Evernote, and they have an AI thing that'll check I don't know what it is. It reviews what you've written, although I don't really care in Evernote, but they have one.
Yeah. Sure.
We got to do something real quick here as a technical housekeeping thing. We're going to look at the screen and we're going to smile like I'm taking a picture. And that way it gives me an easy place to put a thumbnail in. So when we put it on YouTube, are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Works. Thank you. So now I don't have to go looking for the proper frame.
And I like it for marketing. I like it when I forward the podcast, to have that picture there. It's great.
So Rick, will AI kill us?
Well, I don't know that it will kill us. It may be the path to immortality if you're a centibillionaire. But the question I have is if you can upload yourself into a machine, your consciousness as it is into a machine, are you still alive, even if you're aware?
Oh, you just went way too deep for me right there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm not sure I'm alive and aware right now.
Well, it's just the question we're going to start asking, and then we'll probably have to, we only have a few more seconds, but is this a place where we feel should be regulated? Should the government regulate?
Mark, no, don't answer that, Rick. Don't answer it, because we'll go down a rabbit hole. Folks, our guest today has been Rick Jebb. He's got a book out. Where can they get this book, Rick?
It's supposedly everywhere, but the best thing to do is get it on Kindle on Amazon, because you'll get it fast and cheap.
Okay.
But Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everybody's supposedly carrying it, but since it's not flying off the shelves yet, you might have to wait a week or two to get a copy.
I think
I had
Mark
to
had to
wait a
wait
little
for
bit.
his, right, Mark?
Yeah, but that could be the title for those 5 years. Fast and cheap. Like
There you
Rick-
go.
So when is the next edition or the next book coming out?
Well, that's a great question. I want this one to really like take off. And I think I know there's an audience for it, but it's a very scattered audience.
Well,
And so finding them,
we'll keep people informed of it. Rick, I want to thank you so much for being on here. Enjoyed it. I knew I would. And with that, we're going to say goodbye and hope to see you in a coffee shop.
all right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Rick.
Really enjoyed it. This is
Rick,
awesome.
Mexican Sunset was more than good enough.
More than good enough. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Good. 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 Enough. As good enough.